Como decía, seguimos con la siguiente sesión del programa, que en este caso se va a realizar por videoconferencia por Jenny Robert, que es investigadora senior de EDUCAUSE. En particular, sus áreas de interés incluyen todo lo que tiene que ver con el futuro de la educación y el trabajo, toda la parte de educación y trabajo inclusivo social, todo el tema de influencia cultural en Teaching and Learning y también todo lo que tiene que ver con Ethical Data Practices. La verdad que es un placer contar con Jenai. Lamentablemente no hemos podido tenerla presencialmente, aunque esa era la idea y de hecho le agradecemos muchísimo el esfuerzo que había hecho por venir presencialmente, pero bueno, por cuestiones de último momento y por impedimentos, aún así, teniendo en cuenta la diferencia horaria, pues es de estar agradecidos porque está en plena madrugada haciendo el esfuerzo de conectarse para impartirnos el keynote que iba a hacernos esta mañana. ¿Por qué digo que es un placer y es un honor contar con su ponencia? Pues fundamentalmente porque Jenai, a todos aquellos que, de hecho, creo que somos muchos de nosotros los que continuamente recurrimos a informes de EDUCAUSE para ver tendencias, para ver qué está pasando, para ver qué están haciendo otras universidades en particular, sobre todo en Estados Unidos, pero también en el resto del mundo. Pues Jenai es autora de muchos de esos informes de los que realmente pues, tiramos bastante, como por ejemplo uno de los más recientes publicado en marzo es justamente el Horizon Action Plan de Unified Data Models o informes tan importantes como el Artificial Intelligence Landscape Study, que también se publicó de hecho el pasado mes de febrero. Y previamente había también participado y elaborado estudios en particular sobre temas de gobierno del dato. Entonces, teniendo una experta como ella en gobierno del dato, pues merecía la pena hacer el esfuerzo de poder contar con su ponencia en las jornadas de hoy. Sin más dilación, una vez presentada la ponente, no sé si podemos contar ya con... Hey, Jenai.
Hello.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Great, thank you. Thank you for having me from such a far distance.
Thank you very much for your effort. I know it's very early in the morning out there, so thank you so much for the effort and having you here in our conference.
No, it's an honor. Thank you so much.
Okay, I give you the floor, and thank you so much once more.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. My Spanish was good enough to understand about half of it, so that's great. Again, my name is Janae Robert. I'm a senior researcher with EDUCAUSE. EDUCAUSE is a global nonprofit professional association whose mission is to advance the strategic use of technology and data in higher education. As the introduction stated, certainly many publications out of EDUCAUSE, Horizon Report, Horizon Action Plans, and of course the most recent AI landscape study that was published in February. I'll be talking a lot about all of this research, and I'll also be pointing you to some resources that can help you create the future you would like to see for data governance in higher education. I did think about naming this presentation AI is messing everything up, so what the heck do we do to fix data governance? But that was a lot of words on the screen, so I opted to stick with this more traditional title for now. So data governance is a topic that we see reflected in several aspects of EDUCAUSE's strategic priorities, namely to elevate data as a strategic asset in higher education and to help institutions build the capabilities they need to manage risk and build resistance in an era of systemic change. And there's no doubt that we're living in a rapidly evolving and increasingly digital world right now, right? So in the 2024 Teaching and Learning Horizon Report, which was just published on Monday, and I'll link to that report later on in the presentation, so I hope you get a chance to check it out. EDUCAUSE Horizon Report panelists identified the top global trends that are expected to impact the future of higher education in that report. And these trends span 5 distinct categories. They're social, technological, economic, environmental, and political. And the reason that we have these 5 trend categories is because we understand that our institutions don't operate in a bubble, that larger level trends that don't obviously or immediately appear to directly impact our institutions do shape the future in which we need to operate. So this year's trends, the social trends are that public perception of the value of higher education is declining, that student demographics are changing. Students are increasingly demanding access to learning anytime and anywhere. In technology trends, we have concerns about cybersecurity and privacy are increasing. This is an interesting one because we don't normally see cybersecurity and privacy making the list in the Teaching and Learning Horizon Report. Certainly other data-themed Horizon reports typically do discuss cybersecurity and privacy, but this is the first time that we're seeing this make the top list in the Teaching and Learning Horizon Report. We also are observing that the use of learning analytics continues to rise. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. And that the digital divide, particularly for our students, is persistent. In economic trends, we see that demand for and the focus on workforce skills is growing. We think that this is connected to students' concern about the return on investment that they get in higher education. We see that challenges for employee retention in higher education are increasing. And this is something that we've been keeping an eye on for quite some time, but especially since the pandemic. And finally, the third economic trend is that student debt is increasingly impacting students' decisions about enrollment. And again, we think this is connected to this idea of return on investment that students are interested in. In environmental trends, we see that higher education institutions are increasing their commitment to sustainability. The concerns about the impact of big data tools on the environment are rising, and that's something I really try to highlight when I talk about the Horizon Report results and when I speak about our research related to AI in particular, is that the concern about the impact of big data on the environment is not always part of the popular discourse. But among experts and practitioners, this is something that we're really trying to make sure we raise awareness about. And finally, in environmental trends, the demand for green skills in the workforce is increasing. Our last trend category is political. And we see here that panelists have voted to the top of the list that political polarization in the United States continues to impact higher education. And I think that this is absolutely true in multiple parts of the world, not just in the US. That government policy is increasingly influencing education, and that the need is growing for policies that address emerging technologies. Now, here's the question. What's missing from this list of trends? You may have noticed that the most popular topic of the year or of the last year and a half was not listed among those trends, not explicitly. So where does AI fall in the trends for the 2024 Horizon Report? Well, for the first time, panelists actually nominated at least one AI-related trend in every single one of our 5 trend categories. We've never had it happen that a topic was so pervasive throughout our 5 categories. And so, in response to that, for the first time, we've included a new honorary trend category in addition to our typical 5 that is dedicated to the ways that AI is impacting all areas of our life: social, technological, economic, environmental, and political. Our panelists specifically called out impacts of AI on the way we communicate with each other, the tools and methods we use to teach, our students' holistic educational experiences, our economy and workforce, climate change, and then, of course, a variety of political processes. And the question that we ask in our Horizon report and the work that we seek to do day after day in collaboration with our members is to think about how all of these trends will shape our future, and specifically what we can do as professionals in higher education to help higher education institutions rise to new heights to meet new challenges that are presented in our future, as opposed to simply being left behind. So it's really appropriate that we're talking today about data governance, because at EDUCAUSE, we believe that good data governance is a foundational element that institutions need to succeed in the 21st century. Panelists for our 2023 Data Governance Action Plan described the ideal culture that they hope to see embodied in the future of data governance. And in this future, they envision that institutional data culture supports data transparency, collaboration, engagement, adoption of good data governance principles, that all stakeholders have a better understanding of a variety of data governance, aspects of data governance. And that would include things like general data security, data privacy, and data ownership. Also in this report, our panelists envisioned that data governance would be located in a central and enterprise-wide unit, and that their data assets would have cabinet-level accountability. Now, I think that we're living in a really interesting time with the proliferation of AI across the world, let alone at our institutions. And I think that institutions' strategic planning in response to AI provides us with a really good case study, so to speak, for measuring our success at working towards this ideal future. So at EDUCAUSE, our research indicates that institutions are working really hard to keep up with the changing world. They are aware of these changes. They're aware of how rapidly things are changing. And there's really a focus on supporting students throughout all of this change. So here are some data from our recent AI landscape study. As was mentioned, this study was published in February. These data were collected right at the end of 2023. And we had over 900 respondents representing over 600 institutions in this research. And about 15% of the respondents represented institutions outside of the US. So we had a really nice, robust sample to help us understand the state of AI in higher education today. So on this slide, you can see that institutions' primary motivators for AI-related strategic planning have to do mostly with keeping up. They're trying to keep up with students' AI use. They're trying to mitigate the risk of inappropriate AI use, and they're trying not to fall behind other institutions. At the same time, institutions' primary AI-related strategic planning goals focus on supporting students. So it's less about trying to keep up with other institutions and more about getting to our central mission to support students and to support the student journey. So elements here include things like preparing students for the future workforce, exploring new methods of teaching and learning, and improving higher education for the greater good. Now, institutional leaders understand that AI is an element of our responsibility to prepare students for the digital world. Again, thinking about how our institutions don't operate in a bubble, that we are living in this backdrop of an increasingly digital society. This survey respondent to the AI landscape study said that AI knowledge and use will be skills our students will need. We view this as an expansion of our digital literacy commitment to our students. And faculty and staff are being impacted too. In the same AI landscape survey, more than half of respondents said that they have personally been given AI-related responsibilities. Our data do indicate that these responsibilities skew more towards leadership roles. So things like people like executive leaders, managers, and directors are the ones who are most likely to be responsible for AI-related strategy right now. And we think that this makes sense given where we are in this time of institutions really just trying to steer that ship and figure out what the direction is for their institutions. But some of our respondents did say that at their institutions, everybody at the institution is expected to address AI. For example, this respondent explained that at their institution, there is an AI is for everyone campaign, and that there are both grassroots and top-down strategies. And we're also seeing that job roles at our institutions are beginning to be formally impacted by artificial intelligence needs. So this occurs both in the restructuring of existing job roles and in the creation of new ones. For example, 1 in 10 survey respondents in the AI landscape study said that existing non-leadership positions at their institution are already being formally restructured or redesigned to accommodate AI-related needs. And we're also seeing that some new job roles are being created in response to AI. So here's just a sample of the new job roles that respondents told us are being created. These range from executive level leadership positions down to frontline staff roles. And I think what's really interesting is that when we look at this information with a data governance lens, you see that many institutions are not creating job roles that solely focus on AI, although some certainly are, right? We have new centers for AI or AI architects or prompt engineers. But I think that many institutions are leveraging the momentum that they see right now in AI to bring their institutions up to speed and shore up their data governance as a whole. So we're seeing that some institutions are investing. And again, remember that we asked this question about job role changes in response to AI. So our respondents are telling us that in response to AI, they're bringing in new positions such as a chief technology officer or a data scientist or a technology-focused instructional designer. So I think this really signals to us that the proliferation of AI at our institutions is being seen by many institutions as an opportunity to expand the footprint, so to speak, of their data governance efforts. In addition to these formal changes to job roles, we're also seeing that institutions are really focusing on providing AI-related training for faculty and staff. So when we asked respondents about the primary elements of their AI-related strategic planning in the AI landscape study, the 2 most selected elements were training for faculty and training for staff. And I think this is one of the more positive findings from the study. I'll touch a little bit more on training again later in this session. But you can see that institutions are really investing in training for faculty and staff. And I think that we'll also see this trickling down. You see the 3rd most popular option on this list was training for students. I think that we'll see those numbers for students start to increase over time as our faculty and our staff get their feet under them. So I want to reiterate here that the impacts of AI at our institutions are really widespread, but they have profound connections. No matter where those impacts are, they have profound connections to our data governance policies. So asking our respondents about policies in general, more than half of respondents said that institutional policies are being created or revised to address AI-related issues. And it's not surprising that we see the biggest impacts in teaching and learning and in technology and in cybersecurity and data privacy, although, of course, our respondents indicated that there have been impacts across every single area, operational, internally, or student-facing across the institution. But when we dig a little deeper into the impact areas, I think it's interesting to note that 3 out of the 4 largest areas of concern that our respondents indicated to us are directly related to data governance. So 3 of the top 4 here: data security, data readiness, and adequacy of institutional policies to address AI-related concerns. So we're really seeing that this far-reaching and rapid proliferation of AI at our institutions should make data governance one of the most urgent priorities in higher education today. However, and here's where we have some less positive research results. In a 2023 quick poll from EDUCAUSE, just 1 in 4 respondents said that their current data-related structures are ideal for meeting institutional needs. This is particularly concerning that these data come in at a time when data is more important than ever at our institutions. And these results are aligned with some of the research that we see in our AI landscape study. So here, only 30% of respondents indicated that their institution has at least begun preparing data to be AI ready. And more than a third of our respondents said that they didn't know what was happening with data related to AI readiness at their institution. That's something that I'll call out briefly here. Although it's not a major highlight since this is not just an AI-focused talk, but generally when I present data that spans across that AI landscape study, I do try to highlight that there are a lot of questions to which we have larger than normal proportions of respondents saying that they don't really know what's happening at their institution. So we really want to flag this for our members and for members of the higher education community to say that we're in a time when a lot of stakeholders across the institution don't really understand what's happening even at their own local institution. And this is now more than ever an opportunity to break down institutional silos and have conversations about what's happening with data at our institutions. I will note that when we disaggregate these data by job role, and this is true in a number of other items for that survey, that executive leaders or data and analytics staff will closer to about half of those types of respondents say that data is being prepared at their institution to be AI ready. And so I think it's reasonable to estimate that about half of institutions represented in the survey are currently preparing data to be AI ready. But similarly, we see that our data security and privacy policies, data about these policies, fewer than half of respondents in the AI landscape study indicated that their policies are at least somewhat adequate. And again, here, this very large proportion of I don't know, 40% said that they don't know if their privacy and security policies are adequate to address AI-specific risks. So again, we can disaggregate these data by job role, and that proportion really rises to almost 70% of executives and almost 60% of cybersecurity and privacy professionals saying that their policies are at least somewhat adequate to address AI-specific risks. But here, even more than in that data readiness question, the large proportion of I don't know responses is extremely concerning because it points to the lack of stakeholder preparedness to handle AI-related cybersecurity and privacy issues. And as you all know, that endpoint participation in our privacy and security policies is absolutely essential to having strong security and privacy. And so we really see that these data point to quite large vulnerabilities in institutions' data governance approaches. And it's even more concerning to think that the need for good data governance is only going to increase in the future because there's no indication, among other things about our digital world, relating this specifically to our research around AI, there's no indication that AI development is going to slow in the coming years, right? If anything, it's going to increase. So in our data, institutions are indicating that they do plan to increase their focus on the use of AI in the next 2 years. This is both for teaching and learning, for those student-facing processes at the institution, but also for internal administrative work. So, for example, just 11% of respondents to a recent EDUCAUSE quick poll said that their institution is currently using generative AI to a great extent to enhance student learning experiences. But that number almost quadruples to 41% of respondents saying that their institution will focus on using Gen AI to enhance student learning experiences within the next 2 years. And I want to reiterate that we see this across operational areas of the institution. It's not just student-facing operations, it's also internal processes. So, for example, we see the same pattern for using generative AI to boost productivity by automating administrative processes. So I've delivered a lot of bad news during this session, but I really want to end on a more hopeful note, because at EDUCAUSE, we believe that as members of the higher education community, we, you, me, our colleagues working in higher ed, we have the power to envision the future that we want to see and design the actions needed to make our desired future a reality. So reading any of our Horizon reports or our Horizon action plans, the spirit of that research is really to promote and support the intentional action towards a desired future. So I'll link these again on my last slide, but I want to spend a little bit, our last bit of time together reviewing findings from 2 recent data governance related action plans. One published in 2023 was focused on data governance, and the second one published earlier this year focused on unified data models in higher education. And these 2 reports had 2 separate expert panels. All of our Horizon research utilizes expert panels from the community. But I think what was very interesting was that these 2 separate expert panels, who had slightly different assignments in terms of what they were asked to talk about, really came to some similar conclusions. So again, calling back to the beginning of this talk, the Data Governance Action Plan panelists envision this future in which data governance supports transparency and collaboration and engagement, is really built on and centers data security and privacy and data ownership, and is located in some central enterprise-wide unit with cabinet-level accountability. In addition to those elements, they also envisioned that the ideal workforce of the future would have data governance and data literacy formally codified in job roles and responsibilities, that training related to data management and processes would be included in onboarding for staff. And this kind of, again, relates to this idea that institutions are really focusing on training for their staff and their faculty now with the rapid proliferation of AI. Again, I think that we can leverage where we are in this time in history to shore up more of our data governance processes in general, including training. And this panel also envisioned that in the future, each major institutional data source would have a designated data governance authority. So something like a data steward or a data liaison. Finally, this panel identified that institution-wide policy should define data governance and why it matters, that national standards should govern vendor transparency. This was a big theme that crossed both of our panels in how we work with vendors or with industry partners. And then this panel also identified that data systems should be streamlined and integrated across the institution. And that element sort of leads us nicely into what our second panel on unified data models described about the future. So very briefly, I'll go through that for this panel, they identified that the future institutional culture and systems and processes would center holistic student success. So they're, again, sort of calling back to that information we got from our respondents to our AI study, that at the end of the day, we're here for our students, and that all of these processes and systems should connect back to thinking about what is best for our students, leveraging ethical and equitable and inclusive and accessible human-centered data governance practices to support students' learning experiences. This panel envisioned that digital literacy training would be available for all faculty, staff, and students. So again, that emphasis on training for all of our stakeholders. And then this, I encourage you to read the full report here. Again, I'll link it at the end of the session, but this panel did some interesting work in encouraging institutions to use a data mesh architecture that would facilitate the unification of disparate data sources. And they describe, we describe in that report some more specific approaches to that goal. And then the last couple of things from this panel would be that industry-wide interoperability standards for data dictionaries and data management should provide infrastructure to combine data across functional areas, but even more than that, to work across institutions. And I think this is one of the more aspirational goals that the panel described. As you all know, I'm sure, it's certainly enough of a challenge at this time for us to be on the same page within our own institutions, but this panel would envision taking that across institutions as well. So just a few of the actions recommended by the Data Governance Action Panel. I think in the interest of time, I will just go quickly through these, but again, I encourage you to read the full report. Many of these actions focus on communication and collaboration, bringing people together, communicating with your community about the small wins and the big wins, and working together with your partners to really shore up the culture of data governance at your institution. And in the Unified Data Models action plan, there were very similar actions described that really, again, revolve around this idea of working together. I'll call out again that this panel brought up this idea about advocating for transparency and working together with our industry partners. And this is an idea that I like to emphasize mostly because it's something that I think we've been lacking for so long in higher education, is good working relationships with our industry partners, and knowing that as our society is increasingly complex in digital nature, we're going to need to have good relationships with third-party providers, and we're not going to have the capacity to home grow all of our own data solutions. So I think this will be vital as we head into the coming years and into the AI-centered society. So again, you can find these resources at the end of our action plans, but we really encourage everybody to talk to stakeholders at your institution across those silos, even though I think those of you in this room are probably the best positioned to take this set of questions and just answer them yourself. We do encourage you to reach out across silos, talk to people in cybersecurity and in privacy, talk to people in teaching and learning, talk to people in student affairs across the institution, understand what other people's impressions are of what's happening with data governance at your institution, so that even though you probably have a good handle on that on your own and a more accurate understanding of it, it's important to know what everybody else at your institution is experiencing there. And then this is also located in the action plans for your future use, but we have some instructions on how to start with this idea of goals and elements of the future you want to see. So for this activity, working with your teams, you would start on the right side of this sheet. and then work backwards to create short-term to long-term goals or actions that would help you get to those goals, in both easy actions and difficult actions. Again, leveraging this idea of having some short-term wins to help bring the community along in your journey. So I think we're at time, and I just want to thank you all again for your time and for welcoming me from such a distance. There are some bit.ly links here and QR codes that will direct you to all of the resources I've discussed today. So that is the AI landscape study. All of our Horizon reports and action plans can be found on this one landing page. And then I also mentioned some data from some recent quick polls, and you can find all of those at this quick poll landing page. And please feel free to reach out to me via email. I'm always happy to answer questions and provide further resources, or even just have a chat. So with that, thank you so much. And I can take questions if there's time.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I think we are in a very tight schedule, but in any case, we'll try if there is any question from the audience. ¿Alguna cuestión o pregunta que queráis plantear desde? Okay, then I will pose a quick question. And you mentioned that data governance is a foundational element, and I think we have the impression that, at least for higher education institutions in Spain, this is something that we have still a large way to go. From the report that you showed and the stats that you showed, it seems in the US it's also there are only a few institutions that actually are really kind of moving forward. I remember something like a 20–30% were somehow in doing something. So what do you think is the main problem why we are not advancing so much? I mean, we've been working and we've been talking about data governance for a long time, but the reality is not really happening. So is it that we do not take it seriously? Is it that it is very difficult? Is it both? What's your impression on that?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that there are a few elements that play a role in this. It's not a simple problem, which is why it's a persistent problem, right? So I think, for one, if you take a look at some of the workforce research that we've done at EDUCAUSE, we see that our workforce across areas, whether that's teaching and learning, IT, data privacy and security, our workforce is really spread thin right now, and they're constantly being asked to do more with less. And I think that because data governance hasn't been built in as a foundational element of everybody's jobs, it's constantly being seen as being asked to do more, and not always with the resources to get that work done. We're not giving people the time that they need, for example. So I think that's perhaps the biggest issue. And then related to that, I think it's a matter of prioritization. We've sort of let things get away from us. And by we, I don't necessarily mean the data community, because we're all obsessed with data. This has been important to us from the beginning. But I think for others who, again, have not had data governance as a foundational element from day one, over the years, things have just sort of gotten away from them. They focused on other things. And to be fair, people and higher education institutions are hired for deep expertise in specific areas. And so because they didn't start off with this idea that data governance is a foundational element of the work that they do, trying to add that in over the years is very challenging. So, if I were sitting at an institution right now, I would not only be trying to catch up to where we are today, but I would really try to be thinking about our future professionals. So how do we infuse the importance of data governance for our students and help them understand that when they become professionals in the workforce, whether that's in higher education or elsewhere. This is a foundational element of the work that they will be doing, and not only in their professional lives, but also in their personal lives. So I could talk about that for a long time, but that's the short answer.
Okay, thank you. And then another small question regarding AI strategy that you mentioned. I think this is also something where most of the universities here across Europe, and especially in Spain, we are basically in the process of thinking and designing our AI strategies. One of the advices that we got yesterday regarding data governance was make sure this is not rooted and it's not started in IT. So do you think the same applies for AI strategies? I mean, in practice, it seems that nobody but IT is worried about these kind of things in the institutions. But do you think it's a good idea that the IT department is the one leading the AI strategy of the institution, or probably there should be some other approaches?
This really depends on each individual institution. I don't think I would make a blanket statement that AI strategy should or should not be spearheaded by IT. I think that the location of IT at every institution is very different. And we know this from actually research coming out of EDUCAUSE as well, that at some institutions, IT, for example, the CIO has a cabinet level position, perhaps reports directly to the provost or the president, and that at other institutions, this is not the case. And there's not really a judgment call on what's better or what's worse structurally there, but it comes down to a matter of institutional culture. And so I'll return to some of the advice that I gave in the talk, where we really encourage our stakeholders to talk across silos, to get to know what the needs are at their own institution, and to understand the approach that would work best for their stakeholders, for their setting, for their culture, the resources that they have and the challenges that they have, because that will be different for every institution. What I can say about who should lead the charge, so to speak, with AI is that whether you have one unit or multiple units kind of leading in that process, it has to be a collaborative process. So there can't be just one unit responsible for most or all of AI strategy at an institution, because AI, as the data that I showed indicates, touches every area of the institution. And if you leave one group of stakeholders out in those foundational processes, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're going to find ourselves in the same position that we're in, where now we see data governance is not a foundational aspect of what people are doing day to day. And so, and that again relates to people not being brought in early enough. And so I think that if we're trying to think ahead with our AI strategy, we want to bring in stakeholders early so that they are heard, so that the strategy is tailored to their needs, and so that they're active participants in the strategy that we create and the goals and the actions that we'd like them to take.
Okay, thank you so much. We don't want to take more time of you. We know it's very late there in early morning. We will be talking about this for hours. Probably we'll have many other opportunities to collaborate with our working group. So thank you so much for your talk, and see you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.